Hello and a very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha Television with me, Frank Pereira. Well, India has a land frontier, a coastline and exclusive economic zones as well as island territories, vital offshore installations and airspace to defend. The Indian forces therefore have to be kept well prepared and well equipped to repel any external threat. India's defence spending has grown manyfold since the country announced its first defence budget in 1950. Approximately 40% of the budget release to capital expenditure, which is currently driven by equipment modernization programs in each of the three services. On this edition of The Big Picture, we're going to take stock of India's defence sector. Joining me on the program today are Lieutenant General Utpal Bhattacharya, defence expert, retired Rear Admiral Menon, defence expert as well, Air Commodore Prashant, Dikshit, security expert, and Ajay, Banerjee, defence correspondent of the Tribune. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me on the program. Ajay, I'd like to start with you and take stock of where the defence sector is as it stands today.
See, the sector as such you rightly described, Frank, is pretty wide. We are doing pretty much well as far as the spending goes in the capital expenses. We are buying the right kind of equipment at the moment. The American planes, the strategic planes have helped. We are building new submarines. We are building a fair number of warships, which are doing pretty well at the moment. I think the only thing we need to address immediately is the Army's requirements of an artillery gun, of probably a bulletproof jacket, and of probably a new kind of rifle we are looking at. These are three things we need to look immediately at.
Lieutenant General, would you agree with that? I mean, the Army is in dire need for artillery guns, rifles for that matter, and also bulletproof jackets.
Yeah, artillery gun is a requirement. About 4,000 artillery pieces of all present 155 millimeters capacity, whether it is stowed, whether it is tracked. So these things are required, and it's on for the last 1.5 decades, a real good artillery gun. In addition to that, AD guns, for which, of course, our Prime Minister is moving to Russia very shortly, I think today, tomorrow.
24th and 25th.
Yeah, there will be some AD systems. And at present, we have got in our inventory, in the Audis, whether it is Zu-23, the Shilkas or Grad, everything is from that variety. Good old days, it used to be known as from the Warsaw Pact variety. So, as for the AD system,
interesting that you're saying good old days. We are in a new millennium now, 15 years down in the new millennium, and we're still talking about the good old days. So isn't that something to be concerned about?
Absolutely. So, and especially in the while in our wish list, depending on the threat perception, Commodore Dikshit, sir, I'm getting into in your territory a bit. About 42 squadrons should be there, absolutely.
Yes.
The Skyward, the 42 squadron should be there. Similarly, there has to be about 120 to 130 warships. So that is our aim. That is in the wish list. That is as per the threat perceptions. We are getting towards it. And but more importantly, ours was tremendously import-oriented. We are the greatest importer of the arms in the world. That's not a very good tag.
You know, that's something that needs a lot of attention, and we're going to take that up a little ahead in the program and talk about it, as how we are such a big importer, and, the majority of our defense budget actually goes for importing our equipment from abroad. But before we go there, since you brought up the Air Commodore, 42 flying squadrons that we require at the moment, we are awfully short on that front. Even the CAG has punched some holes in the IAF in the recent report, and also the Army Corps as well, so Army Aviation Corps. So that is also a cause for concern.
But let me be very honest. I'm delighted that General Bhattacharya brought up the issue and said this is Air Force area, and therefore I have to speak up. But I believe that India's defense is a much larger thing, and the big picture, as you maintain, has to be seen in the perspective, which is not merely Army, Navy and Air Force. We have to understand about India's surveillance capability, India's detection capability, and we never seem to talk about it. I would rather say that we should find out, is the Russian GLONASS satellite giving us the data? What about our own satellites? Are we getting adequate intelligence? Because there was this story where Mr. Pereira ran into where some Pakistani ships were shot down. We didn't know for some time as to what exactly had happened. That gave me to think that maybe we are not as adequately equipped there. Let me say, the borders are looked after by paramilitary forces, the BSF, the SSB, the ITBP. Now, is there adequate coordination, or in Hindi we call it talmel, between the front fighting troops and the rear fighting troops? I personally believe that those are the issues which have to be examined to some extent. These aircraft will come. The process of acquisition has started. Rafales have been brought in. The Su-30 MKI is adequately being looked after. And also, we are working on a 5th generation aircraft with the Russians. That program hasn't been
Air
shelved.
Commodore, before you continue talking about the Sus, there was a report that the CAG pointed out that, several of these Su aircraft are actually not in a flying condition. So that also needs to be addressed because we do not have the spare parts to try and service some of these aircraft. The serviceability of these aircraft is very low, is what I understand.
Well, that issue has never been covered in detail by the media to which I am exposed to, I dare say.
So please do put it into perspective for us.
Yeah, but the point is, each aircrew is getting about 20 hours a month. In peacetime, if you got that much, I think that's good enough as far as there is quality training being imparted to the aircrew, and all fighting machines are getting airborne once and all. But more than the Su-30 MKI, I think there are problems of the AWACS. We have only 3 AWACS. Are they flyworthy? Yes, reasonably, whenever they get airborne. But we need about 10 of them. So what is happening to that program? There was a requirement of getting French platforms to put the AWAC, which is Israeli Falcon. But there is no news of that. And we are, I dare say, are perennially harping on the acquisition of our combat fleet fighter aircraft, and similarly on the transport aircraft, the MTS. But I'm afraid, are not talking about, as I said a little while ago, surveillance systems. AWACS is a surveillance platform. We need that kind of a thing.
One point what Air Commodore has just mentioned very rightly. You see, from the stratosphere, it was mentioned August 15th last year about the Made in India by our Prime Minister. It had its ripple effect. You can see it on the ground. February this year itself, every 2 years there is an air show. Again in your territory, sir. At Yelahanka near Bangalore, they have an air show. This time I had gone there. The language, the type of negotiations with those honchos of whether it is Boeing or it is Lockheed or British Airways, BAEs and all, it's altogether a change language. They're talking about the serviceability, they're talking about the maintainability, they're talking about that complete change of parts, those parts being manufactured in India, the skill development what Rajiv Pratap Rudy is meddling around. So all these things have been spoken about and they are required to be translated on the ground. They are not speaking about this, so many aircraft, so much is the cost. Keeping little quiet about its rest of the things because they are more important. They will be important after 5 years, 6 years. If any aircraft remains in service for 10 years, in our country, it has to be much more than that, 2.5 years. Look at the MiG-21 when it was acquisition. When the acquisition had taken place, we are still utilizing them. Few accidents here and there, all right.
But before we get into a boxing match between the Army and the Air Force, let's move on to the Rear Admiral and talk about, something that the Air Commodore raised, Rear Admiral Menon. He said, there is no coordination. There is a major lack of coordination between the troops fighting in the front line and, the support staff. Would you agree with that? Do you think that there is a major lack of coordination?
Yeah, I think we need to look at the national interest. The services have traditionally looked after institutional interests. That is, the Army will push the Army's interest, the Navy will push the Navy's interest, Air Force will push the Air Force interest. But that doesn't necessarily cover the national interest. In fact, the most serious lacuna as far as the national defense interest today is concerned is cross-border terrorism. And the way to address cross-border terrorism is by developing the capability like the way the Israelis and the Americans have. And we don't have that capability. We need low-flying, night-flying helicopters carrying army commandos, which can go in and do surgical strikes. And this is a capability that can only come by the services joining together. And it also has got to be joined together with satellite surveillance and various other capabilities, which will give the nation the ability to address the prime need of the hour.
Indeed. Very interesting what you said. Ajay, capability, talking about capability, of course, we need that, but do we have the technology to get this capability?
Frank, one thing is very clear. No country will share cutting-edge technology with you. Be it the US, be it the Russians, they will never share it with you.
So it has to be homegrown.
It has to be homegrown, as I will cite Air Chief Marshal Raha has publicly said, the Air Chief has publicly said that we have to start on our own. Nobody will share it with you. Let that be very clear. You can have tie-ups, you can have joint ventures with the Russians or the Americans or the Israelis or the French, but the matter ends there. Nobody will tell you how to make an engine. Nobody will tell you how to make a nuclear submarine propeller. Nobody will tell you that.
So we are always going to get second best, and Lieutenant General, we are not going to get cutting-edge technology. We are only going to get what's discarded or what's out of date abroad coming to India.
I will not say so. Firstly, you have spoken about, before capability, you have spoken about technology. And before technology, I will also talk about one thing, intention. Admiral brought out that within the belt of about 8 to 10 kilometers, those militant camps, let's be very, say it in plain language, about 34, 35 of them, all along the LC and LOC, they have got these, say, militant camps. Do we have the intention to get inside about 5 to 8 kilometers and hit them? If you have got the intention, then this technology capability will automatically come.
But what about the repercussions, even if you have the intention?
That is the main thing. That is the main thing. What is the repercussions? Now the repercussions is, you have got nuclear, you have also got nuclear. How long will on this false threat, we are going to be absolutely tentative. That is one thing more the country has to decide.
So are you saying that we shouldn't be tentative then?
No, certain things, this much and no further, has to be decided. But one more point, you were talking about the coordinations between the forces in the front and forces behind. There is always a sector commander. All those forces who are there in the LOC, whether they in some places could be Assam Rifles, some places very rightly brought out BSF, but they are under the overall command of that sector. One good thing has happened, there is no problem sharing it with the nation, that before anything, any repercussions, any pro-action activity, reaction of course, one has to go to the South Bloc and take the sanctions from the highest authority.
Then, Admiral, is that the way to go forward, being proactive rather than reactive? Don't be so tentative, is what the Lieutenant General is saying.
No, I see, we've already been through this 3 times. We had Kargil, when our forces were prevented from crossing the LOC. And I was at a debrief with conducted by the Americans. And the Pakistanis clearly said that you can say what you like, but you didn't cross the line because we had nuclear weapons.
So that's a threat then.
Secondly, we had the attack on Parliament. And we did nothing. People talk about the conversations that went on between the service chiefs and the Prime Minister, but whatever the service chiefs offered to do was not acceptable to the Prime Minister, obviously, because we eventually ended up doing nothing. Same thing happened after the Mumbai attack. The same conversation took place between the service chiefs and the Prime Minister, and we eventually ended up doing nothing. Even today, the foremost requirement for military action is likely to be a serious cross-border attack. And now that we've decided that we're going to talk to Pakistan, it's more than likely that the Lashkar-e-Taiba will carry out a major strike. What are you going to do this time? We need a capability to punitively punish Pakistan in case there is a serious cross-border strike.
Air Commodore, what is that capability? Are we capable of taking on Pakistan like the Americans probably did, say, with Osama bin Laden?
Why not? In fact, a factor which hasn't been brought in our discussion today is that there is a special operations command being set up. which is to be constituted by all the three services. I wonder, we recall, two divisions came up. The responsibility for the Cyber Command went to the Navy, the responsibility for Space Command went to the Air Force, and the responsibility for Special Forces Command went to the Army. Logical. Very, very areas of specific influence. But the forces which are going to constitute this will be from all the three. For example, the choppers will be provided by the Air Force, I presume, and the Special Forces will come either from the Garud or the Special Forces of the Army, and the Navy's got Special Forces now. So we have the capability, we have the methodologies to reach, we have the methodology to determine and discern, but do we have a system to take that decision? That's a very complex process. I'm afraid I would not like to comment on that because I may unwittingly divulge India's own deficiencies in that area.
Okay.
But may I take a little liberty?
Please do.
A little while ago, were talking about technology. The IDSA did a study on that and came to this conclusion that India's levels of knowledge in technology are very poor. And since this is going to be feeding to the larger development process, it will take a long time. For example, the development of the LCA, highly criticized, gave at least 20 of the India's universities this little permeation of that technology will take place. A lot of work came out due to that. But we are behind. We are not in the front line. For that, some kind of an infusion has to be done within the IITs and so on. So, special programs have to be initiated, failing which we will find it extremely difficult to make in India unless we wanted the foreign manufacturers to set up shop in the Indian soil and do what they were doing abroad.
Indeed.
How will the permeation take place of technology? Well, I thought a little digression was needed to get a little point through.
Indeed.
But on the capabilities, you said, we have it. Depends on whether you want to practice that art.
Indeed. Very interesting what you brought. Yeah.
Talking about that LCA, Tejas and all. Remember, we have got a DRDO with 52 laboratories. We have got 39 ordnance factories.
But DRDO has been criticized time and again for not coming out with cutting edge technology.
Not only that, they are coming out, they are overrunning the cost and overrunning the time. The PDC is never there to. By the time you come out with your Tejas, it gets outdated.
Yes.
Because they are about 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ahead of the time. Once you are ahead of the time, you will go, the cost will also go twice, thrice, 4 times, multiple times. So these are the things which are required to be tightened up with a fresh scientist, fresh technology, with a one-to-one junction with IITs and the other NITs, engineering colleges and technologies. These are the things right from the grassroots level again. These are required to be done. So there's no shortcut to that.
To the moot question. Is Make in India in the defense sector achieving what it's supposed to achieve? Will it achieve what it is supposed to achieve, Rear Admiral?
Well, I don't think it is achieving as yet. But the bright spot in this whole area is as far as the indigenization of the Navy is concerned. The Navy has gone very far ahead as far as indigenization is concerned. And we are commissioning ships every year. In fact, more than one ship a year. We just commissioned another second Kolkata class INS Kochi, which is state-of-the-art warship, comparable to any warship anywhere in the world. And we are constructing submarines. I think we need to take the naval example of how the Navy has been successful in indigenization and transplant the same as far as the other services are concerned. It is a matter of some concern that we are not able to make an artillery gun in the 21st century, or we are not able to make a successful indigenous tank when we can make 7,000-ton warships. So this is not acceptable, and this Make in India...
Where do you think we are going wrong?
There are a number of
rightly
areas.
pointed out we are making such huge ships and battle vessels, but then it's not happening on the smaller scale.
There are a number of areas where the naval the pattern of working has not been copied in the other areas.
It comes down to lack of coordination again.
Eventually, it is lack of coordination because, and also getting in joint ventures from abroad. There are many ways of getting technology, and if you bring in technology and give it to a public sector yard, a few years later, that public sector yard may have lost all its personnel and have lost the technology. You must transfer the technology to a recipient that is capable of keeping that technology. For instance, we imported the technology for building submarines in the 80s from Howald Deutsche Werft, from HDW. Now we are importing submarine technology from the French. Now that is a crying shame. We should not have to do this again. And similarly, we've done that with the aircraft, and similarly, we've done that with the tanks. So, but the defense minister's idea of Make in India is an extremely good one. And he has suggested various models of a private sector yard acquiring its own joint venture partner, the public sector yard acquiring its own joint venture partner, and they will all compete in an open field. This is the way to go.
Indeed.
I think we will see some improvements as far as this is concerned.
You know, another major concern, I'll come to you, Lieutenant General, before that. Ajay, you know, another major concern is when most of these deals are struck, they are mired, you know, in corruption charges, and, you know, always there's an inquiry, and, you know, deals are scrapped at the last moment because they believe that there's some kind of corruption at some level. So do you believe that Make in India is going to bring that down and there's not going to be as much corruption as there is right now, or suggested that there is right now?
Frank, your question is in two parts. One is about the corruption in the deals. We, by nature, are a suspicious country. We have a history of corruption in defense deals. That is one part. The second part is when the previous defense minister, Mr. A.K. Anthony, was there, he used to refer even anonymous complaints to CBI inquiries. Thankfully, that is not happening in this government, because every company which loses a contract gets somebody to write a pseudonymous letter to the RM and get things scuttled. That has been happening in this country. Now, thankfully, this is not happening. That is a thankful part. Everybody will be suspicious. We are by nature a suspicious country, a country which thinks everybody is wrong. The second part of it is that you are thinking the Make in India will do away with this. Make in India, I believe, is on the right track. It will happen, as Rear Admiral pointed out, that we are making huge vessels, but we are not making smaller weapons. As it started off, we are not making rifles. We are not making BP jackets. But yes, we are making huge warships. I'll add to one more warship. We are making a series of 4 anti-submarine warships.
Yes. Indeed. You know, before we wrap the show, because we're running out of time on the program, I'd like to get closing comments from all my guests on the program today, starting with you, Lieutenant General, on the way forward and looking ahead.
Now, we have also got, just to add on to whatever Admiral was mentioning, we have also got in the MEDAC, they are producing some ICVs. In the Avadi is also active. It's not to the extent it is desirable. That is the main thing. And with this impetus on Made in India, and with only 30% is indigenous, and the target which has been fixed by Raksha Mantri is only 40% by the end of 2016, which is achievable, I was mentioning with so many ordnance factories, so many laboratories where the initial nursery can take place, and thereafter the defense production units are also there. They have to be given the opportunity, right technology. They should be allowed to develop their own technology, then only probably it will fructify. That is the main thing. We have to believe in ourselves.
Air Commodore, closing comments from you on looking ahead and the way forward.
Oh, I'm extremely hopeful of India going forward. This scheme about Make in India is about a year and a half old and will take a little time. I recall admirals talking about the development process. Larsen and Toubro built the Arihant, Larsen and Toubro built the Dhanush, and 10 different kind of systems all over. It only went on to prove that we have the capacity to do it, should we pursue it diligently.
Indeed.
The point is, we have to get some infusion of understanding and technology at higher technological platforms. Aviation platforms are more complex than the other platforms. Maybe some scholarships have to be initiated, some special training programs brought in, and we should go into collaboration like we are going with the Russians, the French, And the Brits, I foresee some results coming up in the next 10 years. Hoping for anything less than that is being overly optimistic.
Ajay, there's no question of doubting the integrity of our armed forces. We all respect them and we all love them for what they do on the ground, in the air or at sea. The only question is the right kind of technology needs to be given in their hands.
See, one thing at a larger level, the kind of loose alliance we today have with the Japanese, Americans, Indians and the Australians on one side. That's a four-way alliance. It'll, in the long run, help us at least put some pressure on China.
Indeed. Okay. And Rear Admiral, final comments from you.
There are two issues that I'd like to bring up. One which is happening, that is the big private sector players are now coming into defense manufacturing. And from this, I only see good things coming ahead in the years to come. This should have been done a long time ago. They were treated with suspicion all these years, and that has stopped. The other issue which is not happening is what Prashant mentioned, the Special Operations Command. State-to-state conflict is going out of fashion these days. And non-state actors are coming up and taking over the center scene. And for this, we need a Special Operations Command. And we are going to set up a Special Operations Command, which is all very well. But where is it? We need to set it up now. And it needs to be properly equipped with all the paraphernalia that will enable a Special Operations Command to conduct operations in a no war, no peace environment. That's the kind of environment that we're going to face in the years to come.
Indeed. All right. On that note, I'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Lieutenant General Utpal Bhattacharya, Rear Admiral Raja Menon, Air Commodore Prashant, Dikshit and Ajay Banerjee for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.